So over the past few videos, I've walked you through the basic setup process for creating hair, editing hair, adjusting how it looks, also how it reacts with objects in the scene using collisions, and also using constraints to pull the hair around and adjust the base curves. We've also briefly touched upon cutting and styling the hair as well. So with all that behind us and fresh in your mind, let's take what we've learned and now put it into practice. And what I'm going to do is just focus entirely on just creating the hair for this character, using the steps that we've talked about previously, and we'll also probably stumble across some other elements which we've not yet discussed. So we've already got our scalp model in the scene which we created previously. It's already UV'd, so we're ready to go with that. So all we need to do, as we showed you before, is assign the hair. So nHair create hair. Now previously we had passive fill set to 1. When we applied that, we can see the blue follicles are passive, the red follicles are the main driving force for the hair. Now for this particular one, because as we saw, the collisions only work off the actual dynamic red follicles, but I want them to work off all the hair, just so the hair can interact with each other, and as it falls a bit more naturally. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to disable passive fill. So that will ensure that all of the follicles are dynamic. So if I click apply now, you'll see they're all red. So that's the first step. There's no other hair system in the scene, so it creates this default one. If we wanted to apply it to a different object, like we will do when we come to do the soft toy, we'll assign that to a new hair system. So that's set up, that's applied. Now the hair is currently too long. We're going to give her quite a short hairstyle. So I'm going to select the hair, scale hair tool, just click on it and just shorten that. We can always adjust this later on, so maybe something like that. Click play just to see how it falls. And that's fine for now. Obviously we have the collisions in the body, but we're not going to worry about that just yet. Let's focus on getting the hair filled out and looking less wispy and thin. So select the hair, let's go into the hair system shape. What I'm going to do is, so I can see this changing as I'm adjusting it, go to interactive playback. So leave that running. Let's turn these off. So let's start with our clump and hair shape. Thinning, so clump width, let's widen those clumps up a bit. Maybe a little bit more. So that fills out the hair nicely. Now you'll notice there are some areas here which are bald, and there's not much hair there, but we can paint more follicles in if we need them, and we'll look at that later on. So don't worry about patches that are looking a bit empty. So we've widened up the clump, maybe a bit too wide. We'll see how that goes. Subsegments, we'll just round that off a little bit. We'll just add one in. So that's the hair. We can adjust bend follow. Just playing around with these sliders just to tweak it until we get a look that we're happy with. Hair width, again, that's a rendering thing, and thinning, as you see, it just makes the hair thinner towards the ends. It's quite uniform at the moment at the ends. Every hair is exactly the same length. Thinning just randomizes that, so we'll maybe add an element of thinning to there as well. Let's just set that to 0.5 for now. So the ends of the hair are looking a lot more random. So it depends on the look that you're after. So let's work our way down. Clump width scale. Now I don't want them to be sharp at the ends, so let's just adjust that to widen up the clumps. Just a little bit, like so. Hair width scale, that's purely a rendering thing, so we're not really going to see anything in here. So let's just leave those as they are for now. As I mentioned before, if I turn on solver display here, collision thickness, you'll notice previously it was only on those few follicles and hair clumps that were actually dynamic. It wasn't attached to the passive fill ones, whereas now it's attached to all of them, and we can see sort of the thickness of the collision. What we can do is set the hair to self-collide. So now these will all attempt to collide with each other. And we can switch to our self-collide thickness and just see, make that thicker. They're all colliding with each other. Make it thinner. So it depends on how much, I suppose it depends on how much body you want the hair to have. The thicker the collision, as you can see, let's go to self collision thickness, which is going to be where it's going to collide with the body. So what we'll do is we will come back to that when we actually set the body to be a collision object. So let's just turn that off for now. So we don't want any more of those. Now there is something else in here that I wanted to play around with. Clump curl, clump flatness, unless it's somewhere down here. Add in a few extra bend links just so the hair bends a little bit more and gets a bit closer to the head, because at the moment it's a bit too far off the head. Start curve attract. Again, we're not interested in a hair looking a bit wild and wiry like that. So we don't want the start curve to we don't want the hair to attract to the start curve. Let's rewind this. Let's restart that. Every now and again it's worth just going back and restarting the simulation. So that's probably because we've been playing around with those collisions. So look at our self-collide. Let's reduce those extra bend links actually. That's probably where that's better. So that's sagging better over her head. Turn off that collision there. So now we're just working through and just getting the general look of what we're after. We don't need forces because for this particular image we're not going to have any wind or anything in the scene, so we don't need to worry about dynamics or forces or anything like that. Now displacements we didn't look at previously, and this just adds it adds displacements to each hair clump. You can crinkle them, you can just make that out there. And again, we'll probably play with these a little bit more when we come to rendering later. Don't want displacement scale. So now let's have a look. Let's close all these down. Let's turn up our hairs per clump and just see how this is going to look when it's rendered, or get more of an idea. As I said, we've got some bald areas up here. So the hair's falling down there, but it is a bit too much over her face. But we can go in and edit the curves directly later on when we need to. And again, it's just about tweaking these values to get the sort of look that we're after. Let's just restart simulation again. So we need to make the body dynamic. A collision object, so let's do that now. So remember, EndMesh, create passive collider. Set that back to reference. Interactive playback. Just see how the hair falls. we go. So it did apply it. I was just a bit worried it hadn't there because it didn't look like it was colliding. So let's just make the hair a bit longer. You can only do that on the first frame. So let's just make it a bit longer and then we'll investigate our collisions. Collision thickness. Let's play that. See how the collisions work. Now it's running a bit slow because we ramped up the amount of hairs per clump. So I'm hoping, there we go, you see there, it's starting to, because the hair's a bit longer, it's got more to collide with and it's starting to collide with the body. So we can stop that. Let's turn off our collision thickness. And we shall just adjust the body. There we go. It'll let us select it. Open up the options. So let's turn on our collision thickness just so we can see. Maybe make it a little bit wider just so the hair comes a bit away from the actual body itself. Turn up the friction a little bit just so the hair will, there'll be a bit more friction there when the hair touches the body, so it might stick to it a little bit more. We don't want any bounce, and let's just add an element of stickiness as well just so the hair sticks to the body just a little bit, maybe 0.1. Let's turn that off. So let's reduce, go to the hair system, let's reduce the display quality rather than going in and adjusting the hairs per clump. And again, let's rewind that. Let's just play it to make sure those collisions are working. That looks a bit weird. It's probably the self-colliding. Let's turn that back up. Let's turn down hairs per clump instead. Drop that down to 10. So there's quite an arc coming off the hair there, so we need to address that as well. Turn off the collision. Well, the collision visibility. So if we add in extra bend links, just to get that away from there. Reduce the bend resistance. As you can see, that's now dropping a little bit more. So let's make the hair smaller, shorter again, sorry. Something like that. Go back. Interactive playback. As you can see, this is running slower because we've got collisions on the hair, we've got collisions on the body. And there the hair collided nicely with the body. If we wanted to speed things up, we could always just go back in, turn off self-collide, and that should make the solver a bit quicker. Yep. Reduce our display quality if it's running too slow. So now we're just at the stage where we're just going to tweak all these settings and just get the hair to a stage where we're happy. And then what we'll do in the next video is we'll start to cut the hair, we'll start to fill in some of these blank bald areas here, and just move on to the next stage.